the TCP session and to the HTTP transaction. Most customers will do it to the HTTP session. HTTP session is really the lifetime a user uses the application, and you would want to make sure that you track that user throughout the lifetime of that session. And then it allows you really to trigger on multiple events, because a session could be multiple TCP connections, right? Threat scoring threshold, you can define the threat, the threshold as the threshold is higher, obviously it takes more points. It'll need to trigger more violations, so that means you're actually making sure you're more accurate. However, there's a balance here with the type of security you want to enable. Obviously, everything here has defaults. You can play around with the signatures. You can define whatever you want, and you can also restore the default if you want to. If we move on to the actual signatures themselves, you can see that each of them would have a score over here, threat score. So you can either use the default or change the specific score if you want to. Obviously, as the threat score is higher, it will trigger this violation quicker and reach the threshold faster. When it comes to exceptions, I mentioned our capability of creating exceptions. As you can see here, Fortiweb has a very extensive solution for creating exceptions for signatures. False positives are a major issue for customers. This allows them to really create an exception based on whichever way you want, whether it's a client IP, the host, the URL, the parameter, the cookie. If this signature is creating a false positive for any reason, whether the application is built incorrectly or whether some behavior on the user, instead of disabling it altogether, you can create a very granular rule to make sure that this only happens in very extreme cases and not having to disable it altogether. When it comes to Sandbox, the usual file upload restriction now has been added with an ability to scan the file with FortiSandbox. You would just enable it here on the rule, and you would go here first of all, obviously, and create the integration point with the FortiSandbox. Same goes here with the FortiGate integration. If you want to integrate with FortiGate for quarantine IPs, this is where you would define it, and then within the policy itself, you will go and enable it. Okay, you just enable FortiGate quarantine IPs. We don't have much time. I'll just jump to the attack log and show you the changes that we've done in the past few months. Obviously, false positive mitigation, a new column has been added. So when you see NA, meaning non-applicable, meaning this was triggered by a non-SQL injection signature. But if this has a SQL injection signature triggered, you would either have enabled or enabled if the feature has been enabled or not. Another column has been added for threat scoring. So you see this little icon here, and an information here in the message: threat score exceeds threshold in HTTP session. Remember, the threshold can be defined to the HTTP request, to the TCP connection, or the HTTP session. In this case, I've defined it based on HTTP session. And you'd have the information here on the right. What is the time period from the first violation to the last? What was the score sum? In this case, 12 points. What was the threshold? The threshold was 10 points. So obviously, this is why it was triggered, because we had a summary of 12 points, scope of session, and how many logs for. And each of the violations would have the threat score here, and you can just drill down to the violation similar to how you would do before this feature was released. In terms of adding exceptions directly from the attack, click on this on the message here, add an exception here. From the attack log, you can do it for the URI or the full URL. If you want a more granular configuration that I just showed you, and that you'd have to go into the signature tab. So this is the attack log. Again, one of the biggest advantages, one of the most important things customers are looking for is visibility. So a lot of times it's not just about security, it's about showing them what happened. And you're not going to see any other product that presents the violation in such a clean manner, in such an understandable manner as Fortiweb. As you can see here, a very clear view of what happened, the match pattern, the connection, the packet header, very similar to Ethereal, the raw body, hex body, whatever you want, a list of the parameters, the cookies, and everything. So this is a huge, huge advantage over the competition. No other product has this type of presentation, and this is something that you should show your customers. Before we finish off and move into the Q&A section, I just wanted to show you the new scanner integration. The way this works is that you click here on Scanner File Import, you choose the different scanner types, whether it's Akinetics, IBM, White Hat, and so on, and you define whether, once pulling in the XML file, whether you'd want to generate rules automatically that protect those vulnerabilities that have been found, or you can define those manually if you want. So in this case, this is an HP Web Inspect that I've pulled. This is the information that comes from the XML file from the HP device. And in this case, I have defined to automatically mitigate those vulnerabilities. And these are the rule names. I can click here and delete and mitigate if it wasn't mitigated already, or cancel, and so on. I can move into the actual rule to see what Fortiweb has created. And one of the things we do better than the competition is we create a rule all the way to the parameter side, the parameter level. So not only to the URL, but to the parameter, something that the competition does not. So it's a lot more granular, it's a lot more specific, it's a lot more accurate. With this, I think I finished the demo portion of the presentation. I don't think we have too much time. So with that, I think I'm going to move to the Q&A section. I don't know if I can see those.
There's a few questions that have come in so far. Don't hesitate if you have a question of the presentation to submit it via your questions, and those will be forwarded over to you, Dan.
Okay, so let's see. Right. All right. How can I combine, there's a question here, how can I combine multiple elements in one exception? You can actually do that. The way you do it, let me show my screen again here. The way you can do that, when you create an exception, is by an and/or relationship. So see here, create an exception. Let's say the URI would be index.asp. Choose regular exception, just a string match, and I can use and or. So I created the URI, and now I can create a parameter as well. Let's call it blah, and I can check actually the value itself, not just the parameter name if I want, and on and on, right? So I can use an and or relationship if I want to, and I can have, I don't remember what the limit is, probably high, but I can have multiple elements here in order to trigger the exception only for a specific event. Moving on to the next question. All right, this is better. So there's another question here for WCCP, whether it's supported on FortiGate 5.2. this is supported on FortiGate, FortiOS 5.2 for sure. Whether it's